India.com ET Now SME Conclave in association with U Broadband was held at the BSE International Convention Centre in Mumbai recently. The event addressed the singular need for SMEs to thrive in India and further growth on a global scale. In the second episode, we featured the salient features of the newly launched BSE SME Exchange, followed by a panel discussion where investment bankers, merchant bankers and venture capitalists spoke about their expectation and apprehensions about the newly launched exchange. We now continue the action from the fifth session of the day. The underlying layer powering the SME exchange comes from a slew of sectors, be it broadband infrastructure, voice, software or internet infrastructure. Next up, we have a special panel discussion on the same, and I would like to invite Paramita Chatterjee, Senior Editor at ET Now, to conduct this panel.
Focus on how SMEs themselves need to change in terms of how their own ecosystem of functioning, of the way they function, the way they look at their business, and how technology has a very important role to play in it. Typically, in terms of the feedback that one receives from SMEs as far as technology is concerned, either there's a complete roadblock, they belong to the old school, or they're willing to adopt it. They don't really know how to go about that entire process, or there's the other end of the spectrum, the newer end, SME companies who have clearly adopted technology and they've seen its benefits. Technology, of course, comes with it the implied implications as far as transparency is concerned, having your data up there, but on the other side, it can really help you as far as costs are concerned. So let's bring in all those perspectives from players who themselves provide technology solutions to SMEs, from companies who continue to provide solutions and are themselves SMEs who've done exceedingly well, and of course other analysts. So I have great pleasure in calling on stage Mr. Pallav Pandey, who's the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder of Nolarity, Mr. Bhavin Turakhia, who's the founder of BigRock.com, Mr. S.K. Singh, the Chairman Enterprise Services Group of U Broadband. And finally, there's Mr. Nikhil Arora, who's the Managing Director of Intuit. Let me start off with a company which has a huge presence as far as the international market is concerned, catering to the SME market, and that's Intuit. And Intuit, a few years ago, Nikhil, if I can just tell your story, you were basically using India more as a sort of an offshore center, but that was 5 years ago. And then about 2 years ago, you realized that there is a huge potential market here as well. Nikhil, take that story forward from there. How easy has it been to cater to and really encourage SMEs to adopt technology?
In terms of our story, it's been a tale of two cities. Essentially, as you know, the numbers for SME in India are huge. Everybody knows there is this unmet need around solving the problems for SME. The challenge is the how. And when we came into India about 5 years back, our approach was very similar to a lot of Silicon Valley companies, that it's a great talent hub, have engineers build products for the US. What we found was that most of our workforce was so passionate about Indian problems, and we started discovering that it's the same problem which exists in India as it exists in the US. Our initial hypothesis was that the problems are different because India is an emerging market, US, UK is a different market, so it'll be a different set of problems. But the surprise was it's the same problem. It's the same problem around, how do they manage their business? How do they grow their business? How do they manage the payments? The journey to solve them will be different. Right. And I think that's where we are focused on now to understand that journey.
So the problem is universal as far as the issue of managing all these various aspects of the business. But clearly, what you're suggesting is the Indian SME, you need to localize and really focus on what he or she requires as far as his company requirements are concerned. Exactly. Okay, Bhavin, take that story forward from there. You started your business about 12 years ago, right? Yes. Today, you cater to companies who want to have a presence on the web. Take that story forward in terms of how both those markets have evolved for you.
I'll actually take a page from what was said earlier right now, Nikhil, that, in fact, in some sense, I run a technology business, and I started off as an SME at some point in time, and now we've sort of grown. In some sense, we're still a medium enterprise. But now, more so ever than before, it's actually so much more easier for a technology-focused SME or a technology-focused business to really addressed many of those problems, right? 10 years ago, you wanted to set up a technology business, you'd have to, scramble around, try and find good talent, where would I host my servers? Do I have international quality sort of hosting? How do I solve my communications problem? How do I accept payments from people? How do I publicize my business? I can't really afford television advertising, etc. But now more so than ever, a small garage startup with 2 or 3 people can actually build a product that rivals some of the best in the industry. Right. You've got Amazon cloud computing, you've got companies like ours which sort of offer hosting at fairly low cost and pretty much enterprise quality hosting, etc.
Okay.
Payment solutions exist and advertising solutions exist where you can spend a couple of $100s and set yourselves up on Facebook or Google and sort of publicize yourself.
I can see some of our viewers saying, hold on, let's just press the brakes here, go a gear a notch lower, because I need to understand and really how I utilize this technology. Let me turn to the panel on the right. Pallab, let me start with you, because you are a company which again caters to SME, and at the same time, the fact is that earlier on, a lot of, it was a sort of a either or, as in do I adopt technology? That's no longer a question anymore in today's world. But yet, how many SMEs are out there that you'd say who have that consciousness that I do need to make that investment and I don't need to necessarily see technology as a cost?
SME as a community, as a smart businessman is always open to taking a decision which can either save cost or it can increase productivity. The challenge is for a company that is offering this kind of a solution to go to a small SME and tell him that I exist and I have something that you will find useful. The whole communication channel, the whole go to the market for a company offering solutions to SME, that is the real challenge, because this huge chunk of 30 million SMEs, and out of that maybe 3 million can actually buy your product. Reaching out to them is the challenge. And that is actually what has changed recently with the advent of, internet and mobile telephony. These people have become reachable. So you can kind of sit at one place and take your solution to these people. The need was always there. And I think the desire for a SME to adopt technology was always there. Just that, the go-to market was more difficult earlier.
Right, let's splice that up a little further, because again the SME world is huge, our country is huge, you've got the urban areas, you've got the semi-urban areas, and he just spoke about the mobile technology and the broadband technology. Of course at You Broadband you are part of that movement. Would you say again, how do you look at the market? Do you categorize it that my urban user is aware, if he's a company in that space, it's not going to be such a huge sort of a gap that I'll have to cross, as opposed to the semi-urban or semi-rural or rural areas?
See, when you look at a SME segment itself, the main problem what they're facing is about managing the entire infrastructure. So when you look at us as a broadband service provider, what we are also trying to cater to a SME segment is that we try to manage their entire IT infrastructure, not just the connectivity part of it. So we are trying to do it because the major problem on the SME front is that how do they manage, whether they have the right resources or the technology. So You Broadband is trying to cater to the end-to-end solution, right, and trying to take care of the entire setup.
So trying to take care of the entire setup. But Nikhil, when you say that to a company, listen, I'll take care of your entire setup, he'll say, hold on, I've been doing it pretty well so far. So, but at the same time, I realize I need technology. So really, where do I start?
Yeah, I think, we do something called Follow Me Homes at Intuit, which is essentially, you go and spend a day or two at the kitchen table with the SME, literally observing them, not asking them. Because when you ask them, you get different answers and you take different interpretations. And what we found from over 5,000 of these Follow Me Homes is they want 3 things. They want the choice, they want the control, and they want the convenience. When I say choice, what they mean is the choice of selecting which features I use, rather than us telling them, hey, you use the whole suite of services. The convenience is, do you give me enough service? In terms of, I'm a small customer, would you be able to service me like you do the other big customers? So that first user experience, that onboarding is very important in getting them over the hump where they're going to use it, forward or not. Because if you fail there, you're likely going to lose that customer, not just for us, but for any other company. Right. And the last is just around, the pricing, and do you give them the right kind of control on choosing, I want to pay monthly, I want to pay yearly, because finance is a big issue. So
basically flexibility is the bottom line. And essentially, Nikhil, would it be correct to say you're looking more at restructuring the company's internal systems and processes, right?
Yes, so we look at both internal as well as helping them grow externally as customers.
Okay, let me take that external thought forward, because, again, the assumption is that you are helping a company. If I want to set up a website, you're making that first point of contact. And most companies today say, hey, listen, talking about technology, let me just go ahead and set a website. At least that's something I need to do. But beyond that, what? Is that like sort of, you think, the easiest step to cross?
We found in sort of website adoption, we've been around for better part of the last 12 years. In most countries, you'll find in developed markets like the United States, there's 30 websites for every 100 internet users. In a country like India, there's 3 websites for every 100 internet users. It's a long way to go. And, it's basically all about sort of how mainstream the internet becomes. Today, 1 out of every 10 people in the country is connected. 5 years from now, 1 out of every 2 people in the country is going to be connected. So as an SME, I can't afford to then ignore the adoption of internet, whether it's for my internal sort of consumption, reducing my cost from a communication standpoint, or whether it's sort of external communication in terms of sort of how I represent myself on the web and how do I acquire customers and what kind of relationships I form with those customers, etc. They're not going to be able to ignore that when half the population of the country has access to the internet, uses it as a convenient mechanism to sort of access information.
So I simply can't ignore it. But then, Pallav, do I need an external consultant? I did a panel earlier, and that was a few weeks ago, and the feeling was that perhaps maybe I don't need a chief technology officer, but I definitely, if I'm not a technologist and I don't have an IT background, then I do need somebody to advise me if I want to rearrange my entire business.
If you look at any SME, typically they will have a set of trusted advisors on technology matters. That could be official relationship, or it could be unofficial relationship. It could be in a tier 3 city, the guy who comes and does the computer AMC, he could be the trusted technology advisor for the owner, who will say, Intuit has come up with this particular hosted software, you can try it out, and then, kind of convince him. And these are the kind of people actually who are approached by companies like ours as their channel partners to reach out to the SMEs. So you need this kind of a bridge to reach out to the SME, because to expect that an Indian SME would come online, understand, evaluate the service, and adopt it is, I think, still about 3 to 4 years or maybe longer away.
Clearly, technology, it's a given, and I think to borrow from a previous conversation, I think we're over the why phase, now it's into the how phase. However, that is, of course, a huge challenge in itself, but clearly we all, I think, the entire SME ecosystem, so to speak, can change, and technology will be a great enabler in that sense, and the realization has to come in, and then we need to take it forward. With that, I'd like to thank all my panelists for joining me on this discussion.
In the past, businesses used to just start up, and then they look around for solutions in patches. For example, somebody would just start with a tally accounting, and then figures out, no, I need a backup, and then figures out I need a storage, and then suddenly realizes I need an antivirus, security in a larger scale than just a smaller scale. So, but now people are thinking very, very different. They're looking at all these from day one, and they're looking at someone who can provide this as a service, as a package, and also gives them connectivity to the World Wide Web and also their private network. So with this is a huge change in my view, and this is going to change further because a lot of it is also a supply-driven demand.
In our last panel of the day, we have a special discussion on how the BSE SME Exchange can help unlock value for the ecosystem. We have various elements of the ecosystem on this panel, right from representatives of the early stage ecosystem to representatives of private equity firms. Once again, I would like to invite Sudhir Sial, editor of Starting Up, to moderate this panel.
It's been an action-packed day where we've had views from a variety of elements. We've had views from investment bankers, we've had views from SMEs, we've had views from Mr. Lakshman Gogolot, we've also had views from investors. In the last panel of today, we're actually going to bring all of it together. I'd like to start off by inviting Mr. Lakshman Gogolot onto stage, CEO of the SME Exchange. Aditya Mishra, founder of the Head Start Network. Mr. Deepak Shadadpuri, stalwarts, who's been investing in late-stage companies for a very long period of time. Mr. Vivek Joshi of Kotak Private Equity. And finally, Mr. Vicky Khosla of Trade India. Welcome guys. I'd like to start off this discussion by coming to you, Vivek. Vivek, we've been discussing the BSE SME exchange as a private equity, as part of the private equity industry. How excited are you about the exchange, and what are some of the key questions you have for the folks at the exchange?
Well, we certainly do see a lot of merit in something like the SME exchange. As a private equity, one of our challenges is finding the right recipients for our equity, and typically it is said that there's about $20-25 billion of funds in the country waiting to be invested, and for every private equity, a challenge is to find an appropriate company to invest in. Therefore, what we see is this could be, if I may use the word, an incubator to prepare companies for the next stage. Now, the key question here will be as to how these companies are going to be listing, and at 25 crores, as I understand, the face value of shares, how they will grow on to the next stage so that private equity firms can get interested in that ecosystem.
Great. Deepak, you actually represent both sides because you're an angel investor with the Mumbai Angels as well, apart from with BCP. So you look at both sides. Where do you see more acceptance for this exchange? As an angel investor, wearing the angel investor hat or wearing the private equity hat?
You know, I think it's too early to say. I think capital and exchange is a very, very valuable part to play in the capital markets ecosystem. I have a slight conflict because my fund, Beacon India, is also a shareholder in the NSE.
Sure.
And we think it's critical for a developing and growing community in India to have more exchanges to create a liquidity for all stages for companies of all stages in their growth cycle. I think taking a step towards a SME exchange is something that I watch closely. I've seen similar exchanges come up in Singapore. You had the AM in the UK. And performance has been mixed. It's not good or bad because, you know, all of these markets developed a new exchange for the first time with a number of objectives, some which were achieved, some which were not. And I actually want to watch and see what the BSE does and what the NSE will do to encourage liquidity. Because if there's no liquidity, the value of an exchange actually disappears.
Fantastic. Lakshman, it comes to you. One of the questions he spoke about was getting more liquidity onto the exchange. It's too early to say because we have only one company, which is BCB Finance, which is on the exchange right now. But what are some of the steps you're taking to ensure that companies that list on the exchange actually get investor interest, analyst interest, publicity, and so on and so forth?
See, there are small caps, mid cap. You see, mostly they are illiquid on the main exchange.
Sure.
On SME exchange, this market making support that is being provided is a huge boom actually for the liquidity point of view.
Okay.
This concept has been tried and tested in different SME exchanges across the world and found to be, quite successful.
Sure. If you could elaborate on the market making differences.
See, market making here, the market maker is there at least 75% of the time. There can be 5 market makers. They will provide two-way quotes. And there can be 5 market makers for a scrip, and generally members of the exchange who want to become market makers, they apply to us and we empanel them.
Right.
So one is market makers, they will be competing among themselves as well as creating a competition among the buyers and sellers. So that will reduce the spread that is there between buyers and sellers, and it will come down the gap, and transactions will start happening. And market makers will also facilitate exit for the small investors. As small investors want to take position, like purchasing couple of lots and all, they can provide it. So that way, I think market makers' role is very clearly defined to ensure that transactions happen and liquidity is there, and to provide exit to the investors.
Ritya, I want to come to you. You represent the early stage startup community here. What's the mood amongst the startup community on the SME exchange? What are some of the key queries you have? Because what we've seen in the past is that startups, once they scale and reach a certain point, they generally take angel funding, VC funding, and the really fast growing ones go over to the NASDAQ, like what we saw with Make My Trip. Very few companies actually list here on the BSE. what are some of the key questions you have on the SME exchange, and how much of an impetus you think this will give to startup fundraising?
There are a lot of people who would have probably raised some money from friends and family or from angels, and they are finding it a little difficult to go for a VC funding.
Sure.
Essentially because the VC funding sets a bar fairly high, and there are good businesses which do not kind of qualify at that level. And those guys certainly find this particular opportunity very interesting, because all of a sudden there is an option for them which did not exist earlier. Having said that, what also does happen is that there's a lot of business model change that happens, and there are concerns about how open or what's the degree of acceptance of, let's say, a business model change among the retail investor. So while we know that there's a lot size which is around a lakh, but still that's an investor which is in the startup parlance is still retail. So there's a question about the ability to bear risk and tolerance for mid-course changes, something that, let's say, you will find VC private equity guys fairly open to, and they assist you in that process. Second piece is what I would call the expertise. So when you're looking at the alternate that is there for some of these guys, which is to go and raise money from a high net worth individuals, for example, Deepak, or again the institutional investors, a fair bit of expertise or a fair bit of network that comes along with the capital. That does not have an easy replacement in this model.
Vicky, I want to come to you. So we've sort of heard from both the investors and the enterprises. In terms of compliance, in terms of regulatory requirements, you think the BSE has done everything it could have done to make this exchange one that is easy for entrepreneurs to work with?
You know, I would start by saying it's a good step. Okay. You know, everybody talks about SMEs, backbone, this, that, but if you look at what is being done for SMEs in this country is very little. Okay. So I think this is a very good move forward. And they have one option at least to unlock value, get themselves listed. That's one of the ambitions every SME has, to one day get listed, you know, and go public. So that way, as far as compliance is concerned, look, right now, there's no too much of clarity on it. We don't know how much compliance is required. We've heard instead of 3 months, 6 months, which is very good. And if a SME is really ready and wants public funds, why shouldn't he look at compliance?
I want
to
emphasize a couple of points here. You know, as I said, there is no shortage of money to invest in companies. We generally don't find suitable candidates. Now, the advantage of compliance is going to be that somebody who's been through this process and has proven himself to be able to step up to the plate on compliance and corporate governance, that is immediately one major concern which is solved for us. Second is the discovery of valuation. This will also partly address that issue. Third is what he just said about relationship management, and I'm impressed that there are already 100 such candidates around. There's more money, there aren't enough candidates around to invest in. So as these candidates come in and graduate, that becomes a pool for even larger investors to focus on and reach out. So I see that also as a significant thing which can help larger investors meet some of their requirements.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, this brings us to the end of the ET Now SME Conclave. On behalf of ET Now, I would like to thank all of our guests for their presence. With the support of all of the elements of the ecosystem, I have absolutely no doubt that the next decade will be that of the small-medium enterprise. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all of our partners without whom this would not have been possible. Our title sponsor, Trade India, our associate sponsor, U Broadband, and our location partner, the Bombay Stock Exchange. You've all been a fantastic audience. Thank you for taking out your time and making this event a grand success.
You know, SME Conclave is a very, very good idea. You know, if you understand a SME, he's so busy in his day-to-day operation, he's trying to do everything. He has very little time, but the most important thing is he has to get educated about what's happening around and what he needs to do and things like that. So these kind of SME conclaves are going to be very, very useful for the SMEs.